For 5 years, Gideon believed his sacrifice meant something, that his devotion to his paralyzed wife, Patricia, proved the depth of his love. Until he stood outside their bedroom door one Tuesday afternoon and heard her laughing on the phone, calling him nothing more than a disposable servant she'd been using all along. The words that came next would shatter everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his wife, and the accident that had changed their lives forever. What Gideon didn't know was that the truth waiting for him on the other side of that door would force him to make a choice that would either destroy him or set him free in ways he never imagined possible. But before we continue with this beautiful story, please kindly subscribe to this channel and comment where you are watching from, and also share below, what life or relationship challenge are you facing right now, or what someone you know is going through? Don't forget to like this video as well. All these mean a lot to us. Gideon had always been the kind of man who kept his promises. When he married Patricia 7 years ago, he meant every word of those vows, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. He just never imagined worse in sickness would arrive so soon, wrapped up in a car accident that left his beautiful, vibrant wife paralyzed from the waist down. The accident happened 2 years into their marriage. One moment, Patricia was driving home from her yoga class, singing along to the radio. The next moment, a drunk driver ran a red light and changed everything. Gideon remembered getting that call at work, the way his hands shook so badly he could barely hold his phone. He remembered running through those hospital corridors, his heart hammering against his ribs, praying to every god he could think of. Patricia survived, but the woman who woke up in that hospital bed was different. The doctors explained the spinal injury, the surgeries, the rehabilitation that might or might not work. They used words like permanent and adjusted expectations and new normal. Gideon listened to all of it while holding Patricia's hand, watching tears stream down her face. He made a decision that day. He would be there, no matter what. The first year after the accident was brutal. Patricia went through surgery after surgery, each one promising hope that never quite delivered. Gideon took a leave from his engineering job. Then when that ran out, he negotiated remote work. Their savings account dwindled as medical bills piled up. Insurance covered some of it, but not the experimental treatments Patricia insisted on trying, not the specialized equipment, not the modifications their home needed. Gideon sold his car and started taking the bus. He stopped going out with friends. Date nights became memories. His whole world shrunk down to their house, to Patricia's needs, to the endless routine of medications and physical therapy and doctor appointments. He learned to help her bathe. He learned to prepare special meals that wouldn't cause digestive issues. He learned to read the tiny shifts in her expression that meant she was in pain but wouldn't say it. He became a caregiver, a nurse, a companion, all while trying to hold on to the threads of being a husband. Patricia's mother, Patricia, moved in to help. That's when things got complicated. Patricia had never thought Gideon was good enough for her daughter. She'd made that clear from the beginning, with her tight smiles and passive-aggressive comments about how Patricia could have married that lawyer, Daniel, who still sent Christmas cards. After the accident, Patricia's criticism became more direct. "You're holding the spoon wrong, Gideon. Patricia doesn't like her pillows arranged that way. Why are you giving her medication at this time? The doctor said morning doses should be earlier." Gideon bit his tongue. Patricia was helping, he told himself. Patricia needed her mother. He could handle a little criticism if it meant Patricia got better care. But Patricia wasn't just critical. She was territorial. She treated Gideon like an incompetent employee she couldn't quite fire. She'd swoop in whenever he was helping Patricia, correcting him, pushing him aside, making him feel useless in his own home. And Patricia never said anything. She just watched with tired eyes as her mother took over. The intimacy between Gideon and Patricia evaporated. Not just physical intimacy, though that was gone too. The emotional connection that had made them laugh together, finish each other's sentences, communicate with just a look. All of it faded like old photographs left in the sun. They became two people living in the same house, connected by obligation and medical schedules. Gideon told himself this was normal. Trauma changes people. Recovery takes time. He just needed to be patient, be present, be the man Patricia needed him to be. So he kept going. He woke up at 5:30 every morning to help Patricia with her exercises before his work calls started. He prepared her meals exactly the way she liked them. He read to her when she couldn't sleep. He researched new treatments and called specialists and filled out insurance forms. His friends stopped calling after a while. They got tired of canceled plans and unanswered messages. His brother Ryan tried to check in, but Gideon always said the same thing. "I'm fine. Patricia needs me. I can't complain." His own needs seemed selfish compared to what Patricia was going through. She was the one in the wheelchair. She was the one who'd lost her independence, her career as a dance instructor, her dreams of having children. What right did Gideon have to feel tired, to feel lonely, to feel like he was disappearing? 5 years. That's how long Gideon carried on like this. 5 years of sacrifice that felt noble and necessary and right. 5 years of telling himself that this was what love looked like when life got hard. Then came that Tuesday in October, a seemingly ordinary day that would crack open the truth Gideon had been too devoted to see. Gideon had taken the afternoon off work for a virtual conference he didn't really need to attend. He decided to use the time to organize the garage, a project he'd been putting off for months. But first, he wanted to check if Patricia needed anything before he got started. He walked down the hallway toward their bedroom. The door was slightly open. He could hear Patricia's voice, bright and animated in a way he hadn't heard in years. She was laughing, actually laughing. The sound stopped Gideon in his tracks. When was the last time he'd heard her laugh like that? He stepped closer, not trying to eavesdrop, just curious about what had lifted her spirits. Maybe her physical therapist had called with good news. Maybe one of her old friends had reached out. "Oh my God, you should see him," Patricia was saying, her voice dripping with contempt Gideon had never heard her use. "He's like a little puppy dog, always desperate for approval. Honestly, it's pathetic." Gideon froze. His hand hung in the air, inches from pushing the door open. "Mother was right from the beginning," Patricia continued. "I should have married Daniel, but no, I had to go for the nice guy, the stable, boring engineer who thinks devotion makes up for excitement." She paused, and Gideon heard her laugh again, but this time it sounded cruel. 5 years and he's still here, playing the martyr. It's almost impressive how clueless he is. The hallway tilted. Gideon pressed his palm against the wall to steady himself. "The best part?" Patricia's voice dropped lower, more intimate, like she was sharing a delicious secret. "I don't even need him anymore. The settlement finally came through last week. 3.2 million from the drunk driver's insurance. I haven't told Gideon yet. Why would I? He's been useful, I'll give him that. A disposable servant who actually believes he's being a good husband." Gideon felt something inside his chest crack open. It wasn't his heart breaking. That would come later. This was something deeper. The foundation of reality itself fracturing beneath his feet. "Daniel's been so patient," Patricia said, her voice turning soft, affectionate in a way she hadn't spoken to Gideon in years. "We've been talking every day for the past 6 months. He wants to be with me, even with the wheelchair. Says he always loved me, always regretted not fighting for me back then. Once I get rid of Gideon, once the divorce is final, Daniel and I can finally be together. Mother's already planning where we'll live. She found this gorgeous, accessible condo downtown." If you're enjoying this story so far, pause and comment, "I am enjoying this story," below. Gideon couldn't breathe. 6 months. Patricia had been planning this for 6 months, and he'd been completely blind to it. Every meal he'd prepared, every bath he'd helped with, every night he'd stayed up researching new treatments, all of it while she was plotting her escape with another man. I know I should feel guilty, Patricia was saying, but honestly, Gideon made this easy. He's so eager to be the hero, so desperate to prove he's worthy of me. I just had to let him. The accident was the best thing that ever happened to our marriage. It gave me a way out with a settlement and a replacement husband waiting in the wings. Gideon backed away from the door, his legs moving on autopilot. He found himself in the garage, sitting on a storage box, staring at nothing. His mind couldn't process it. 5 years. 5 years of his life, sacrificed for a woman who saw him as nothing more than convenient help. A disposable servant. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization of how stupid he'd been. All those times Patricia had seemed distant, unappreciative, he'd made excuses for her. The trauma, the pain, the adjustment to her new reality. But what if it was simpler than that? What if she just never valued him the way he valued her? And Patricia, God, Patricia must have known. All those criticisms, all that territorial behavior, she was pushing him out, making space for Daniel. Patricia's mother had been in on it from the beginning. Gideon sat in that garage for an hour, maybe 2. The concrete floor was cold beneath him. His hands were numb. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear traffic sounds. People living normal lives where wives didn't mock their husband's devotion and planned secret escapes with old flames. He thought about confronting Patricia, screaming at her, demanding answers. But what would be the point? She'd said everything he needed to hear through that bedroom door. She'd revealed exactly what she thought of him, of their marriage, of everything he'd sacrificed. The question wasn't what she'd done. The question was what he was going to do about it. Gideon stood up. His legs felt stronger now, steadier. Something was shifting inside him, something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Agency. Choice. The realization that he didn't have to keep being the devoted husband to a wife who saw him as disposable. He walked back into the house. Patricia was in the living room now, Patricia beside her. They were watching television, looking like the picture of a caring daughter and mother. Gideon studied them both, seeing them clearly for the first time in years. "Gideon, dear," Patricia said without looking away from the screen. "Patricia's cushion needs adjusting, and she'll want her afternoon medication in 20 minutes. Don't forget." Patricia glanced at him briefly, her expression neutral, giving away nothing of the phone call she just finished. "Also, I'm thinking salmon for dinner. You know how I like it prepared." Gideon looked at his wife, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, even in the wheelchair, but beauty was just packaging. Inside was someone he no longer recognized, someone he possibly never really knew. "Sure," Gideon said quietly. "Salmon, no problem." He went to the kitchen, his mind racing. Patricia wanted to divorce him, to cast him aside for Daniel and her mother's approval, and a new life, funded by settlement money she hadn't bothered to mention. She thought he was clueless, pathetic, easy to manipulate. She had no idea what was coming. Gideon pulled out his phone and opened a search engine. He typed carefully, deliberately. His hands weren't shaking anymore. "Divorce lawyers near me." Then another search. "Hidden assets in divorce." And one more. "How to protect yourself in a marriage with a disabled spouse." Little did Patricia know, her disposable servant was about to become her biggest problem. And what Gideon would discover in the next 48 hours would turn Patricia's perfect plan into a nightmare she'd never seen coming. The truth about the accident, about Daniel, about the settlement money, it was all about to unravel in ways that would leave everyone reeling. Gideon had spent 5 years being the perfect caregiver, but in just 48 hours, he was about to discover that devotion had made him blind to a conspiracy far worse than his wife's cruel words. Patricia thought she'd hidden her tracks, but what Gideon uncovered wasn't just betrayal, it was evidence of a plot that would make his blood run cold and transform his heartbreak into something much more dangerous. The morning after overhearing Patricia's phone call, Gideon woke up different, not broken, not defeated, focused. He'd spent most of the night in his home office, the door locked, diving into research that felt like preparation for battle. He'd learned something important during those dark hours. Documentation was everything. He started his day the same way he always did. Wake up at 5:30, help Patricia with her morning routine, prepare breakfast exactly how she liked it. But now, every interaction felt like acting in a play where only he knew the real script. "You seem tired," Patricia said as Gideon adjusted her pillows. Her tone carried that familiar edge of criticism. "Are you getting enough sleep? I need you functional, Gideon." He smiled, the same patient smile he always gave her. "I'm fine. Just stayed up late watching a documentary." The lie came easily. Too easily. Patricia arrived downstairs wearing her usual expression of vague disappointment. "Gideon, you've prepared Patricia's eggs wrong again. She prefers them softer. Haven't you learned anything in 5 years?" "You're right," Gideon said. "Let me fix that." He took the plate back to the kitchen, dumped the eggs in the trash, and prepared new ones. But while he cooked, he pulled out his phone and started taking photos. The medication schedule on the refrigerator, the expensive rehabilitation equipment Patricia had insisted they buy, the bills piled on the counter. Everything was evidence now. During his lunch break, while Patricia napped and Patricia was out grocery shopping, Gideon called the first lawyer on his list. Jennifer Santos specialized in high-conflict divorces. Her reviews mentioned words like aggressive and strategic and wins. "Mr. Chen," Jennifer said after Gideon explained the basics, "let me be direct. Your situation is complicated. Your wife is disabled, which means a judge will be sympathetic to her. If you divorce her without proper preparation, you could lose everything and end up paying significant alimony and support." Gideon felt his stomach drop. Even if she's been planning to leave me? Even if she's already involved with someone else? "Emotional affairs aren't treated the same as physical ones in court," Jennifer explained. "And if she can prove she's dependent on you for care, that works in her favor. However, you mentioned a settlement she hasn't disclosed?" $3.2 million, Gideon said. "I overheard her on the phone. She got it last week from the accident lawsuit. I knew the case was ongoing, but she told me it would take years to resolve." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. That changes things. Hidden assets in a marriage are serious. If she's concealing a settlement, especially one that large, that's fraud. But we need proof. Without documentation, it's your word against hers. Gideon felt the first spark of real hope. How do I get proof? Bank statements, legal documents, any correspondence about the settlement. Can you access her email or phone? Gideon thought about Patricia's laptop, sitting on the desk in their bedroom. She used it daily for her online support groups and video calls. She'd never bothered with complicated passwords because she trusted him completely. Or rather, she trusted that he was too devoted and stupid to ever snoop. "I can access her laptop," Gideon said. "Then that's your first step, but be careful. If you're planning to leave this marriage, you need to do it smart. Document everything. Financial records, evidence of her communications with this Daniel person, proof of the settlement, anything that shows she's been deceptive. And Gideon, start separating your finances quietly. Open a new bank account she doesn't know about. Transfer small amounts gradually. Protect yourself." After the call ended, Gideon sat in his car outside the house, his hands gripping the steering wheel. This felt wrong, sneaky. He'd never been the type to go through someone's private things. But then again, he'd also never been the type to be called a disposable servant by his own wife. That evening, Gideon waited until Patricia was settled in bed, watching her nightly television shows. Patricia had gone to her own room. The house was quiet except for the muted sound of a cooking competition coming from the bedroom. "Patricia, I'm going to take a shower and then finish some work emails," Gideon said from the doorway. "Need anything before I get started?" Patricia barely glanced at him. "I'm fine. Just make sure you're not up too late. I need you alert tomorrow. We have that specialist appointment at 11. Gideon showered quickly, then went to the home office. But instead of opening his work laptop, he retrieved Patricia's laptop from the bedroom, claiming he needed to charge it for her. His heart pounded as he opened it in the privacy of the office. No password. She trusted him that much, or cared that little. Gideon started with her email. He felt dirty doing it, like he was becoming someone he didn't want to be. But then he found the first message from Daniel, dated 8 months ago, and the guilt evaporated. "Patricia, my love," the email began. "I can't stop thinking about our video call today. Seeing your beautiful face, hearing your voice, it reminds me of everything I lost when I let you go. Gideon doesn't deserve you. He never did. You deserve someone who sees you as the incredible woman you are, not a patient to manage. When this is all over, when you're free, we'll have the life we should have had from the beginning. I promise." Gideon scrolled through dozens of emails. Love notes, plans, Daniel sending pictures of condos he wanted them to view together, Patricia responding with heart emojis and promises about their future. The intimate way they wrote to each other, like they'd been together for years instead of conducting a secret, emotional affair. Then Gideon found a folder labeled Settlement Documents. His hands trembled as he opened the files. The lawsuit had indeed settled. $3.2 million, deposited into an account Gideon had never heard of. An account in Patricia's name alone. The deposit date was 2 weeks ago, not last week like she'd told Daniel. She'd been sitting on this money, hiding it, while Gideon paid bills from their joint account and watched their savings disappear. But it was the next document that made Gideon's blood run cold. A life insurance policy. On Gideon, $2 million taken out 3 years ago, with Patricia as the sole beneficiary. Gideon didn't remember signing any life insurance paperwork. He would have remembered something that significant. If you're enjoying this story so far, pause and comment, "I am enjoying this story," below. He opened the policy details, and there it was, his signature. Except it looked slightly off. The way the M curved, the spacing of the letters. He pulled up a document he'd actually signed recently for comparison. They were similar, but not identical. Patricia had forged his signature on a $2 million life insurance policy. The question was, why? If she was planning to divorce him, the insurance would be meaningless. Unless she wasn't planning a divorce. Unless she had something else in mind. Gideon felt sick. He was being paranoid, he told himself. Patricia might be cruel and manipulative, but she wasn't dangerous. She couldn't be. But then why forge a life insurance policy? Why hide it? He kept searching through the files, and what he found next shattered whatever rationalization he'd been building. A folder labeled Research, containing saved articles about accidents in the home. How common are fatal falls? Can an accident be proven as negligence? What happens if a caregiver makes a mistake that leads to death? Gideon stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. He paced the small office, his mind racing. No, this couldn't mean what he thought it meant. Patricia was researching these things for legitimate reasons. Maybe she was worried about her own safety. Maybe it was about something else entirely. But the timing, the life insurance policy, the hidden settlement money, the secret relationship with Daniel, it all painted a picture that terrified him. Gideon forced himself to sit back down. He needed to think clearly. He took screenshots of everything, the emails, the settlement documents, the life insurance policy, those disturbing research files. He created a hidden folder on his work laptop and transferred everything there. Then he emailed copies to himself and to a new email address he created just for this purpose. He was about to close Patricia's laptop when he noticed one more folder. Medical records. He opened it, expecting to see documentation of Patricia's surgeries and treatments. Instead, he found medical evaluations he'd never seen before. Reports from doctors Gideon didn't recognize, and the content made his heart stop. According to a neurological evaluation dated 6 months ago, Patricia had regained significant sensation and muscle control in her lower body. The prognosis was marked as excellent for potential mobility with intensive physical therapy. Another report, dated 3 months ago, noted that patient continues to show remarkable progress but has declined aggressive rehabilitation, stating she's not ready emotionally. Gideon reread the documents 3 times, unable to process what they were saying. Patricia could potentially walk. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not without assistance, but she had mobility she'd never mentioned to him. All this time he'd been helping her with transfers, with exercises, treating her as completely paralyzed from the waist down. Why would she hide recovery? Unless being paralyzed was useful to her. It kept Gideon devoted, kept him trapped in the caregiver role, kept him from questioning her behavior or her future plans. A memory surfaced. 2 months ago, Gideon had come home early from a grocery run, having forgotten his wallet. He'd walked into the house quietly and heard movement upstairs. When he got to the bedroom, Patricia was in her wheelchair, breathing hard, like she'd just exerted herself. She'd claimed she was doing her arm exercises. At the time, Gideon hadn't thought anything of it. Now he wondered what he'd almost walked in on. He closed the laptop carefully and returned it to the bedroom. Patricia was asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light from the television. Gideon stood in the doorway, looking at this woman he'd devoted 5 years to, and felt like he was seeing a stranger. Who was she really? What was she capable of? Gideon went back to the office and called Jennifer Santos, even though it was almost midnight. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice alert. "I found something," Gideon said. "Something bad." He explained everything. The emails, the hidden settlement, the forged life insurance policy, the research about fatal accidents, the medical records showing potential mobility Patricia had concealed. With each revelation, Jennifer's responses became more urgent. "Gideon, listen to me carefully," she finally said. "What you're describing could indicate serious criminal intent. The life insurance policy with the forged signature, combined with research about fatal accidents, that's potentially conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly worse. You need to go to the police." The police? Gideon felt like he'd stepped into a movie plot, not his real life. "You think Patricia would actually try to hurt me?" "I think Patricia has 3.2 million reasons to want you gone, plus another 2 million in insurance money if something happened to you. And I think she's been planning this carefully. Those medical records showing she's hiding mobility, that suggests sophisticated deception. Gideon, you're potentially in danger." Gideon sat down hard. "What do I do?" "First, don't let her know you know any of this. Act normal. Second, I'm sending you contact information for a detective I work with, specializes in fraud cases. Third, tomorrow you're going to go to your bank and open a separate account. Move half of everything in your joint accounts. You have legal right to do that. Fourth, I need you to get those screenshots to me tonight, all of them. And fifth, start thinking about somewhere safe you can stay." Leave the house? The suggestion felt absurd. This was his home. "Gideon, if I'm right about what she's planning, staying in that house is dangerous. At minimum, you need a backup plan. A friend's place, your brother, somewhere you can go quickly if you need to." After the call ended, Gideon sat in the dark office, watching the numbers on the clock change. In 24 hours, his entire understanding of his marriage, his wife, and his life had been demolished and rebuilt into something he barely recognized. The woman sleeping down the hall wasn't the victim he'd been caring for. She was something else entirely. A manipulator, a fraud, possibly worse. And Gideon, the disposable servant, was about to become very undisposable. But he needed to be smart, careful. One wrong move and Patricia would know he'd discovered her secrets. He needed more than just screenshots and lawyer advice. He needed irrefutable proof and a plan that would expose everything. What Gideon didn't know was that in the next 3 days, the confrontation that would change everything was already in motion, triggered by a person he never expected to be his ally. and the revelation waiting for him would expose a conspiracy even darker than what he'd already uncovered. Gideon thought he'd discovered Patricia's entire plan, but the call he received at 3 in the morning from an unknown number would reveal that the conspiracy went deeper than he ever imagined, and the person on the other end would give him something more dangerous than evidence, a choice between revenge and redemption. Gideon hadn't slept. He'd been sitting in the office, staring at the screenshots on his laptop, trying to piece together a strategy. When his phone rang at 3 a.m., he jumped, his heart hammering. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Chen?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar, slightly hoarse like she'd been crying. "You don't know me. My name is Rebecca. I'm Daniel's wife." Gideon's entire body went rigid. Daniel had a wife. Of course he did. Why hadn't Gideon thought to search for that? "I know about Daniel and your wife," Rebecca continued. Her voice shook with barely controlled emotion. "I've known for weeks. I've been watching, gathering evidence, and I think you need to hear what I found." They met at an all-night diner 40 minutes later. Rebecca was younger than Gideon expected, maybe early 30s, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd been sleeping as poorly as him. She carried a leather folder, which she placed on the table between them like a peace offering. "I hired a private investigator," Rebecca said without preamble. 3 months ago, I knew Daniel was having an affair, but he's smart about it. Never leaves evidence on his phone, always uses his work laptop. But investigators have ways." She opened the folder and pulled out photographs. Daniel and Patricia together. Not just emails and phone calls, actual photographs. Patricia in her wheelchair at a park, Daniel beside her, their hands intertwined. Another photo, Patricia reaching up to touch Daniel's face. The timestamps showed these meetings had been happening for months. "But that's not the worst part," Rebecca said. She pulled out more documents. The investigator dug into Daniel's finances. He's been paying for something called a specialized rehabilitation facility, $20,000 over 6 months. When I confronted him about it, he claimed it was a business investment. But I did more research. She slid a pamphlet across the table. "This is the facility. It's a private rehab center that specializes in intensive physical therapy for spinal injuries. Very exclusive, very expensive. And according to their records, they've been treating a patient named Patricia Chen." Gideon felt the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. "She's been getting secret physical therapy." "Therapy you didn't know about," Rebecca confirmed. "Therapy Daniel was funding. Why would he pay for your wife's rehabilitation unless they were planning a future together?" Gideon showed Rebecca what he'd found, the medical records indicating Patricia's hidden recovery, the settlement money, the life insurance policy. With each revelation, Rebecca's expression hardened. "My God," she whispered, "she's planning to take everything from you." "It's worse than that," Gideon said. He explained his lawyer's theory about the suspicious research files and the potential danger. "Jennifer thinks Patricia might be planning something more permanent than divorce." Rebecca's face went pale. "Daniel has life insurance too, on me. He increased it 8 months ago. I signed the papers without really looking. I trusted him." Her voice cracked. "What if they're planning to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers bound together by betrayal, staring at evidence of a conspiracy that seemed impossible, yet was laid out in documents and photographs in front of them. "We need to expose them," Rebecca finally said. Her voice was steady now, determined. "Not just divorce them, actually expose what they've been planning." Gideon thought about the revenge that had been simmering in his chest since overhearing that phone call. Patricia thought he was disposable. She was about to learn otherwise. But as he looked at Rebecca's face, at the pain there that mirrored his own, he felt something else. Not just anger, a strange kind of clarity. "If we expose them," Gideon said slowly, "we destroy them. Their reputations, their relationship, everything. Is that what you want?" Rebecca's eyes flashed. "They destroyed us first. Daniel promised me forever. We've been married 9 years. We have a life together. And he was going to throw it all away for your wife? While potentially planning to... She stopped, took a breath. Yes, Gideon. I want them exposed, don't you? Did he? Gideon thought about 5 years of devotion, 5 years of sacrifice. But he also thought about who he'd become in those 5 years. Small, diminished. A man who'd forgotten he had value beyond his usefulness. Patricia's cruelty had hurt him, but his own willingness to disappear had enabled it. I want her to face consequences, Gideon said carefully, but I don't want to become the villain in my own story. Rebecca leaned forward. Then let's be smart about this. We have evidence of fraud, conspiracy, potential insurance fraud. We go to the police, let the legal system handle it. They face real consequences, not just public embarrassment. Gideon pulled out his phone and called Jennifer Santos. At 3:30 a.m. she answered again, and Gideon wondered if lawyers ever slept. He explained about Rebecca, about Daniel's payments for secret rehabilitation, about the life insurance policy on Rebecca too. This is enough, Jennifer said, her voice sharp with focus. This is absolutely enough for police involvement. The pattern of behavior, the financial fraud, the forged documents. Mr. Chen, I'm calling my detective contact right now. You and Rebecca need to go to the police station first thing in the morning. Don't confront them. Don't warn them. Just gather your evidence and file a report. At 7 a.m., Gideon arrived home. He'd told Patricia via text that he'd gotten called in for an early work emergency. Patricia was already up, making breakfast. Patricia was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. Gideon, finally, Patricia said with her usual disdain. Patricia's been waiting for her morning routine. You know she needs consistency. Gideon looked at Patricia and realized she must have known. All of it. The affair, the settlement, probably the life insurance too. She'd been helping Patricia orchestrate this entire plot while treating Gideon like an incompetent servant in his own home. Sorry, Gideon said. He went through Patricia's morning routine on autopilot. The exercises, the medications, the breakfast. But his mind was far away, thinking about what would happen next. By 10 a.m., Gideon and Rebecca were sitting in a police station, laying out their evidence to Detective Raymond Cross. The detective listened, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. This is complex, Detective Cross said. Multiple potential crimes across 2 relationships. Fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, possible conspiracy to commit more serious crimes. The life insurance policies with the forged signature and suspicious research files are particularly concerning. What happens now? Gideon asked. We investigate. We'll need to verify the medical records, confirm the settlement was hidden, authenticate the insurance documents. We'll interview the rehabilitation facility, examine financial transactions. This could take weeks. They don't know we know, Rebecca said. What if they try something before you finish investigating? Detective Cross looked at them both seriously. I'm going to be direct with you. Based on what you've shown me, I believe there's enough evidence to suggest potential danger. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Harrison, you should consider staying somewhere else while we investigate. And you absolutely should not confront them. But Gideon knew confrontation was inevitable. Patricia would notice his changed behavior. Daniel would realize Rebecca was acting strange. The truth was coming whether they managed it or not. That evening, Gideon came home to find Patricia in the living room with an unexpected guest. Daniel. He was tall, handsome in that polished lawyer way, and he was sitting on the couch next to Patricia's wheelchair, his hand resting possessively on her armrest. Gideon, Patricia said, her voice light, almost cheerful. We need to talk. Daniel's here as my attorney. I'm filing for divorce. So she was going to beat him to it. Gideon felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. This was the confrontation, happening on her terms, but he was ready. If you're enjoying this story so far, pause and comment, "I am enjoying this story," below. "Okay," Gideon said simply. He sat down in the chair across from them. Patricia blinked. She'd clearly expected more reaction. "Okay, that's all you have to say?" "I mean, I knew this was coming," Gideon said. "I heard you on the phone last week, talking to Daniel, calling me a disposable servant, discussing your plans." The room went completely silent. Patricia's face drained of color. Daniel straightened up, his lawyer instincts activating. But Patricia's expression shifted through surprise, anger, and finally settled on cold calculation. "You were eavesdropping on my private conversation?" She made it sound like he'd committed some terrible violation. "I was walking to our bedroom in our house," Gideon said. "You were talking loud enough for me to hear. About the settlement you've been hiding, about your relationship with Daniel, about how you've been using me for 5 years. You don't understand the context," Patricia started, but Gideon held up his hand. "I also know about the medical records showing you've regained mobility you never told me about. The secret physical therapy sessions Daniel's been funding. The life insurance policy you forged my signature on. The research you've been doing about fatal accidents." Patricia gasped. Daniel's face went rigid. And Patricia looked at Gideon like she was seeing him for the first time. Really seeing him. Not the devoted servant. Not the disposable husband. Someone who'd outmaneuvered her. "You went through my private files," Patricia said, her voice shaking with rage. "That's illegal. Invasion of privacy." "Actually," Gideon said, "accessing a shared laptop in our marital home during an ongoing marriage isn't illegal. But forging someone's signature on a life insurance policy? That's fraud. Hiding marital assets like a $3 million settlement? That's fraud too. And the police are very interested in all of it." Daniel stood up abruptly. "Gideon, I think we should all take a breath here. These are serious accusations." "They're not accusations," Gideon said. "They're facts. Documented facts. Screenshot facts. Facts I've already shared with my lawyer and the police. Detective Cross is conducting an investigation right now." Patricia's wheelchair rolled forward slightly. For a moment, Gideon saw something flash across her face. Fear. Real fear. "You went to the police? What did you expect me to do? Keep playing the devoted husband while you plan to take everything from me? Or worse?" Gideon stood up. "I spent 5 years sacrificing everything for you, Patricia. My career, my friends, my life. I did it because I loved you, because I thought that's what marriage meant. But you saw all that devotion as weakness. You used it. You exploited it. You don't know what it's been like for me," Patricia said, and now her voice was breaking. "Being trapped in this chair, losing everything I was. I needed someone to blame, and you were there. There. Always trying so hard. It was suffocating. So you decided to betray me?" Gideon felt tears burning his eyes, but he wouldn't let them fall. "Not now. Instead of talking to me, instead of being honest about your needs or your recovery or your feelings, you built a whole secret life. You planned to take my money, my dignity, maybe even my life based on that insurance policy and those disturbing research files." "I would never," Patricia started, but she couldn't finish, because they all knew she'd considered it. Maybe not seriously, maybe just as a fantasy, but she'd considered it enough to research it, to create the insurance policy, to set up the pieces. Patricia finally spoke up. "Gideon, you have to understand, Patricia deserves happiness. After everything she's been through." "Don't," Gideon said sharply. "Don't make this about her suffering. We all suffer. The difference is, some of us don't respond by destroying the people who love us." Gideon looked at Daniel. "Rebecca knows everything, by the way. About the affair, about the money you've been spending, about the life insurance policy you increased on her. She's at the police station right now, too." Daniel's face went ashen. "Rebecca knows?" "She hired a private investigator. Has photos of you and Patricia together, financial records, everything. Gideon almost felt sorry for him. Almost. She's leaving you, and she's making sure you face legal consequences too. Patricia wheeled herself closer to Gideon. Please, she said, and her voice was different now. Vulnerable, real in a way he hadn't heard in years. Please don't do this. We can work this out. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but does that mean you have to destroy my life? Gideon looked down at his wife. Part of him still loved her. The her from before the accident. The her who used to laugh at his bad jokes and dance around their kitchen and talk about their future with stars in her eyes. But that person was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed. I'm not destroying your life, Gideon said quietly. I'm just not letting you destroy mine anymore. He walked upstairs and started packing a bag. He could hear voices rising in argument below. Patricia's anger, Daniel's panic, Patricia's desperate attempts to take control. But none of it touched Gideon anymore. He felt separate from it, like he was already gone. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Santos. Detective Cross just called. They have enough evidence to bring formal charges. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Patricia and Daniel will be arrested within 48 hours. You did the right thing. Did he? Gideon looked around the bedroom that used to be his sanctuary, at the wheelchair in the corner that had defined their life for 5 years, at the photos on the dresser showing a couple who looked happy but were already falling apart. Gideon thought about revenge. He'd gotten it. Patricia would face criminal charges. Her settlement money would be tied up in legal proceedings. Her relationship with Daniel was destroyed. Her reputation was ruined. He'd won in every measurable way. But he didn't feel victorious. He felt empty. 3 weeks later, Gideon sat in his brother Ryan's guest room, reading news articles about the case. Patricia and Daniel had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. The story had made local news because of the dramatic elements: the paralyzed wife, the devoted husband, the hidden affair, the forged insurance policies. Public opinion had turned sharply against Patricia. The comments sections were vicious. People called her manipulative, evil, a monster. They praised Gideon for exposing her. But he couldn't read the articles without feeling sick. Rebecca had filed for divorce from Daniel. Last Gideon heard, she was in therapy, trying to process the betrayal and move forward. She'd called him once, to thank him for giving her the courage to act. They'd promised to stay in touch, though Gideon doubted they would. They were reminders of each other's worst moments. Jennifer Santos had negotiated a settlement where Gideon kept most of the marital assets. Patricia's settlement money was frozen pending the criminal trial. The life insurance policy was invalidated due to the forged signature. Financially, Gideon would be okay. But money wasn't the point. It had never been the point. Gideon's phone rang. He almost didn't answer when he saw it was Patricia, but curiosity won. Gideon, Patricia's voice was subdued, all the arrogance stripped away. I'm calling to apologize for everything. I was so focused on what I thought Patricia needed, on protecting her, that I enabled something terrible. I should have seen what she was becoming. I should have stopped her. Gideon didn't know what to say. Patricia continued. Patricia's in a dark place right now. The legal trouble. Losing Daniel. Losing you. She's realized what she threw away. She asked me to tell you she's sorry for all of it. She knows you'll never forgive her, and she doesn't blame you. But she wanted you to know that somewhere under all the anger and manipulation, there was a person who did love you, before she lost herself. Gideon felt tears finally come, the ones he'd been holding back for weeks. Tell Patricia I hope she finds herself again. I really do. But I can't be part of that journey. After the call ended, Gideon looked out the window at his brother's backyard. Kids were playing next door, their laughter carrying on the wind. Life continuing, indifferent to his personal tragedy. Gideon thought about the man he'd been 5 years ago. Hopeful, in love, ready to handle anything. Then he thought about the man he'd become, the invisible servant, sacrificing everything until nothing was left. And now, who was he? The victim? The victor? Both? Neither? 6 months later, Gideon had moved into his own apartment, small but comfortable, his own space. He'd started therapy to work through the betrayal and his own codependency issues. He'd reconnected with old friends. He'd even gone on a few dates, though nothing serious. The trial had concluded. Patricia pled guilty to fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. She served 8 months in a minimum security facility. Daniel lost his law license. Their relationship had imploded spectacularly once the legal pressure hit. Gideon didn't follow the details too closely. He was trying to move forward. One Saturday afternoon, Gideon was at a coffee shop reading when someone sat down across from him. He looked up, startled. It was Patricia. Not in a wheelchair, standing, dressed in jeans and a sweater, looking more like the woman he'd married than he'd seen in years. "I know I shouldn't be here," Patricia said immediately. "I'm violating the restraining order, but I needed to see you, to say things in person." Gideon should have called the police, but he didn't. He just waited. "The accident didn't paralyze me permanently," Patricia said, her voice steady. "You know that now, but it did break something else, something in my mind. I became obsessed with being a victim because it felt easier than fighting to recover. And you let me. You enabled it because you loved me too much to push me to be better." "That's not fair," Gideon said. "I was trying to support you." "I know, and I twisted that support into something toxic. I made you my servant because it was easier than facing my own fears about recovery, about who I'd be if I wasn't broken." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "What I did to you was unforgivable. The manipulation, the betrayal, the cruelty. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too scared and selfish to appreciate it." Gideon felt something loosening in his chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. "What do you want from me, Patricia?" "Nothing," she said. "I want nothing from you. You've given me more than I deserved already. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself. Real therapy, real physical rehabilitation, facing what I did and why. And I wanted you to know that you deserve so much better than what I gave you. You deserve someone who sees your devotion as the gift it is." Patricia stood up to leave, then paused. "I heard you're dating someone. I hope she makes you happy, Gideon. Truly happy, in the way I never could." She walked away, moving with a slight limp, but walking nonetheless. Gideon watched her go, feeling the weight of 5 years finally lifting. He pulled out his phone and texted Emma, the woman he'd been seeing for the past month. "Want to grab dinner tonight? I have something I want to tell you about being ready to actually move forward." Her response came quickly. "Yes, I've been waiting for you to be ready." Gideon smiled. Maybe that was the lesson in all of this. Love wasn't about sacrifice that destroyed you. It wasn't about devotion that made you disappear. Real love was about seeing and being seen, supporting without enabling, being strong enough to be vulnerable. Patricia had called him a disposable servant, and in a way she'd been right. He'd made himself disposable by forgetting he had value beyond his usefulness. But he wasn't that man anymore. Gideon paid for his coffee and walked out into the afternoon sunlight, ready to write a new story. One where he wasn't the devoted victim or the vengeful hero, just a man who'd learned the hardest way possible that sometimes the person you need to save most is yourself. And that sweet revenge isn't about destroying the person who hurt you. It's about rebuilding yourself into someone they could never diminish again. It's about walking away with your dignity intact and your heart open to something better. That's the revenge that actually heals. That's the victory that actually matters. This story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about something much deeper that touches all of our lives in ways we might not even recognize. It's about the dangerous line between love and self-destruction, between devotion and disappearing, between being supportive and losing yourself completely. Gideon's journey teaches us one of life's hardest lessons. Sacrifice without boundaries isn't love, it's self-erasure. And when you erase yourself for someone else, you don't just lose who you are, you also lose the ability to have a real, healthy relationship. Think about it. Gideon spent 5 years being the perfect caregiver. He gave up his career momentum, his friendships, his hobbies, his own needs. He told himself this was what love looked like. This was what marriage vows meant. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. But here's the truth nobody talks about. Those vows were never meant to require you to disappear. They were never meant to turn you into a servant who forgets they're also a human being with value, needs, and dreams. The first lesson here is about boundaries. Gideon had none. When Patricia needed help, he helped. When Patricia criticized him, he accepted it. When his own exhaustion and loneliness screamed for attention, he ignored it. He believed that setting boundaries with someone who was suffering would make him selfish. But boundaries aren't selfish. They're essential. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot love someone well when you've forgotten how to love yourself. Patricia's behavior was inexcusable. The manipulation, the betrayal, the cruelty. But Gideon's willingness to accept less than he deserved enabled that behavior. When you teach people that your needs don't matter, they eventually believe you. When you show people that you'll tolerate anything, they'll give you anything to tolerate. This doesn't excuse Patricia's choices, but it does highlight an important truth. We train people how to treat us by what we accept. The second lesson is about the difference between supporting someone and enabling their worst instincts. Gideon thought he was being supportive by never pushing Patricia, never questioning her, never demanding she work on her recovery or treat him with respect. But real support sometimes means tough love. It means saying, I see you're hurting, but the way you're treating me isn't acceptable. It means encouraging growth, not accommodating stagnation. Patricia became trapped in victimhood, partly because Gideon never challenged it. He was so busy trying to make things easier for her that he made it easy for her to stay stuck. True love doesn't just comfort, it also challenges. It sees potential and calls it forward, even when that's uncomfortable. The third lesson is about the danger of defining yourself entirely by your usefulness to others. Gideon became Patricia's caregiver instead of Gideon, a man with his own identity, interests, and worth. When your entire sense of value comes from what you do for others, you become disposable the moment they don't need you anymore. And that's exactly what happened. Patricia saw Gideon as a servant because he'd reduced himself to servant functions. He'd forgotten he was also a partner, a person, someone deserving of respect and reciprocity. This pattern shows up everywhere, not just in dramatic situations like Gideon's. It shows up in the parent who defines themselves entirely by their children and loses themselves when the kids grow up. It shows up in the employee who works 80-hour weeks to prove their worth and wonders why they still feel empty. It shows up in the friend who's always available, always helping, but never asks for help themselves. When you make yourself small enough to fit into someone else's needs, you shouldn't be surprised when they start treating you as small. The fourth lesson is about the necessity of paying attention to how people treat you, not just what they're going through. Gideon made excuses for Patricia's coldness, her ingratitude, her criticism. She's suffering, she's traumatized, she's adjusting. All true. But also true, she was treating him badly. Both things can exist at the same time. Someone can be going through something difficult and still be responsible for how they treat you. Pain doesn't give anyone a free pass to be cruel. When you ignore red flags because you're being understanding, you're not being compassionate, you're being complicit in your own mistreatment. Real compassion includes having compassion for yourself. It means recognizing that everyone is fighting battles, including you, and your battles matter just as much. The fifth lesson is about the transformative power of choosing yourself. When Gideon finally discovered the truth and chose to protect himself, to document the abuse, to involve lawyers and police, to stop enabling Patricia's plans, that wasn't revenge, even though it felt like it. That was self-respect. That was Gideon finally remembering he mattered. And paradoxically, that's when he became most powerful. Not as the devoted servant, but as a person who valued himself enough to demand better. The most beautiful part of this story is the ending. Gideon could have stayed bitter. He could have let Patricia's betrayal define him forever. Instead, he chose healing. He chose therapy. He chose to understand his own patterns of codependency. He chose to open his heart again while maintaining the boundaries he'd learned were essential. That's the real victory. Not destroying Patricia, but rebuilding himself. And notice what happened with Patricia too. When she finally faced consequences, when Gideon stopped enabling her, when she had to confront what she'd become, she started to change. She started real therapy. She started real physical rehabilitation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is stop protecting them from the consequences of their actions. Gideon's choice to walk away actually gave Patricia the space to grow in ways she never would have if he'd stayed and kept enabling her. The final lesson is this: love should expand you, not shrink you. A healthy relationship makes both people bigger in joy, in growth, in becoming who they're meant to be. When a relationship consistently makes you smaller, when you're constantly sacrificing without reciprocity, when you've forgotten what brings you joy outside of serving someone else, that's not love. That's not even close to love. Gideon learned that sweet revenge isn't about hurting the person who hurt you. It's about refusing to hurt yourself anymore. It's about choosing healing over bitterness, growth over victimhood, self-respect over self-sacrifice. It's about walking away from people and situations that diminish you and walking toward a life where you're valued, respected, and loved. Starting with how you value, respect, and love yourself. That's the lesson we all need to hear. You are not disposable. Your needs matter. Your worth isn't measured by how much you sacrifice. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is choose yourself.